Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video, I want to take a look at some of the new rogue legendaries that were added into the files for World of Warcraft, but not like we can actually make these legendaries currently. Blizzard removed the ability for us to boost all these characters, where we could talk to a big Tauren that looked like a Death Knight, who would teleport us into the legendary crafting room, so we could craft these legendaries and test them out. Since then, Blizzard did a character wipe, forcing everybody to get to max level 60, and with my character getting bugged at level 56, forced to restart a new character, I can't really test the legendaries as of this moment. Nor do I know that they are enabled right now, as a lot of the features for the game, like choosing your covenant and even access in Torghast, have been a little bit on a fritz. So in today's video, I want to take a look at what we have for the new legendaries for rogues, talk about them, and see which ones are good. And hopefully very soon, I'll be able to test every one of these legendaries. First of all, we got a new legendary for Assassination. Out of the 4 legendaries that each spec is getting, at least at the very beginning of the game with the release, and potentially more specs will get more legendaries as the time goes on, maybe, the Assassination Rogue had 3 out of its 4 legendaries already revealed. The 4th legendary is an interesting one. It's called Dashing Scoundrel, which is actually exactly the same legendary as a 4-piece and a 2-piece bonus from Antor's PvE raid gear. Envenom increases the critical strike chance of your poisons by 30%, and the critical strikes generate 2 additional energy. Now, this is actually kind of a huge legendary, since there's plenty of talents for Assassination where you can play with extra critical strike, and stacking crit as a stat is generally good for Assass because you generate a lot more combo points, so you get more value for 55 combo points that you spend into a Mutilate. This is a kind of an altered version of the 2-piece and the 4-piece version of the raiding gear that Assassination Rogues used to play with. And if I remember back in the day, it was actually quite good. This seems more of a good PvE type of legendary, as it doesn't actually increase the damage, but the critical strike chance could potentially be an increase, and the extra energy could reward you extra common points, which I guess in a way could be extra energy. But it's not a direct like 20%, 15%, whatever number, just flat increase, but still an interesting one to add to the collection of 4 different legendaries that Assassination has to play with. Alright, now let's get into some of the other fun legendaries. We'll start off with my favorite spec of Outlaw, as we finally got some Outlaw legendaries to look at. Besides the one legendary from Legion, Green Skins Wickers, that we were able to discover last week. We were treated this week with Concealed Blunderbuss, which is originally Blunderbuss artifact weapon ability. When Saber Slash strikes an additional time, there's a 33% chance that your next pistol shot will fire 3 additional times. This is a little bit different, as Blunderbuss simply just increased your pistol shot damage and make you shoot your gun like a shotgun, but here it'll fire pistol shot 3 times. Right now we have no idea if this means each one of those pistol shots would generate a combo point, or if it'll just be a separate hit that could crit or non-crit. As of right now, we simply cannot test it, but it does seem like an interesting one that could be good for sustained damage. Celerity is a really strong one. You have a chance while Slice and Dice is active to gain Adrenaline Rush effect for 3 seconds. This one apparently was a rogue tier 18 combat 2-piece bonus, and I don't really remember running this one that much, but the idea behind just getting a Adrenaline Rush from time to time does seem kind of nice. The only thing I would want to see is the proc chance of this one, and right now on the beta, we can't really test the proc chance just yet. But if the proc chance is high enough, where maybe it's kind of similar to Vision of Perfection Major from the Battle for Azeroth Essences, then this could be a decent legendary, as Slice and Dice is basically maintained at all times, especially if you get the grand melee roll from Roll the Bones. And finally, the strongest legendary I've ever seen, and I'm a huge fan of this one, Guile's Charm, which is literally Bandit's Guile from previous expansions. Take advantage of the natural ebb and flow of combat, causing your Sinister Strike to gradually increase all damage dealt by up to 30%. What this effect as a passive used to do for combat rogues before Outlaw was a thing, every 4 Sinister Strikes, and even at some point in expansion, Revealing Strikes included, every 4 of those increases damage by 10% and gives you a buff for like 15-20 seconds. But 4 more Sinister Strikes gives you a 20% buff, and finally at the end 30%. And it went from a green buff to a red, to a yellow buff, then to a red buff. Red meaning you're doing the most amount of damage possible. This legendary and this passive from back in the day is insane. This was what made combat rogues back in the day. This what gave them a lot of punchy damage. Back in WoD, people were afraid of the red buff because it actually increased the damage, I think, by 50% instead of 30. They made it extra strong. But this is still a very strong buff for Outlaw to have it come back to the spec. Now, we don't know how many Sinister Strikes it's going to take to get this buff, but if it's about 4 or 8 or anything along those lines, then I think this is going to be a very powerful legendary. I mean, doing 30% more damage in a ramp-up fashion, where you expect that's more about sustained damage, this is going to give you, again, that natural ebb and flow of high damage, and then not an increase in damage. With how consistent Blizzard is making Outlaw rogues with Slice and Dice and Roll the Bones, this is going to make the spec actually very, very powerful, or at least I'm guessing it is. Again, all depends on how many Sinister Strikes it takes for you to reach that 30% damage buff, but it's totally possible as an Outlaw to slow down your gameplay and really milk the buffs, really stay in those 20%, 30%, 10% damage increases for as long as possible, and synergize certain abilities like Killing Spree for even burst your potential. Plus, combined with the way Between the Eyes is supposed to work, right now it's bugged, it's going to create for a very powerful bursty situation. This legendary by itself could be a deal maker or a breaker for Outlaw, and as strong as this effect was from back in the day, I'm expecting for this effect to be just as strong, and I think this actually might be, potentially, our best in slot legendary going into the next expansion. Then we have Subtlety legendaries, and it's good that Subtlety finally has some. I will be honest though, they're not super creative, or at least most of them are not. Finality is a cool one. It's a trait from your artifact weapon. I think it was unlocked at later rings to make the spec even stronger. Eviscerate, Rupture, and Shadow Vault increase the damage of your next finisher move by 20%. Very similar to the original Finality. Notice how it doesn't say Slice and Dice. Well, because all these are to increase the damage. If this worked off of Slice and Dice, you could achieve some massive Eviscerates in your opener. So your opener might be a little bit slower, but Eviscerates and Shadow Vaults and Ruptures can feed your next big finisher, which could be insanely good for PvP. Akari Soul Fragments. After using Shadow Strike or Cheap Shot, your target suffers the Shadow Strikes from the shadows 2 seconds later at 100% effectiveness. This one could be really good based on the damage, or if the Shadow Strikes are all shadow damage, that means to go through armor, or if they can generate your common points, or if they can proc off of Weapon Master, where sometimes your Shadow Strikes can hit twice in a row for free. So if this one works off of all those abilities, that could be interesting. I was maybe hoping that might be a legendary that makes Backstab really strong for a possible Gloomblade build. I think that something like that would be cool for something like that to come back, but highly doubt it's going to happen if you end up running this Lego. Then we have the Rotten. For 2 seconds after activating Symbols of Death, your Shadow Strikes or Backstab generate 4 additional common points. You're not going to be able to press this ability, Shadow Strike, Eviscerate, Backstab for 4 common points, unless you have some incredible amounts of haste. This is literally the first of the dead, the gloves from Legion. They were good as far as I remember, but I remember them getting rotated in and out depending on the build that you ran. This one's pretty good as a 2-part combo as a legendary, but I don't really know how good this was as a 1-part combo. However, this could be a pretty big eviscerate for you, especially if you go for Deeper Strat, where you can spend more common points into finishers. All those legendaries haven't been creative, they're simply just Legion things that are coming back. But this one I thought was interesting because I don't remember how many rogues remember the tier 18 Subtlety 2-piece bonus, and I like this one. Vanish grants 5 common points and increases damage dealt by 15% for 10 seconds. For a spec that's all about vanishing from sight and ambushing the enemy, making Vanish an offensive cooldown for Subtlety just seems like it's actually really cool for the class fantasy, to be able to utilize the shadows to empower yourself or something along those lines. That just sounds really, really cool to me. I think this legendary is going to be really cool and fun to play with. At least I would have fun with it. I think in PvP, you probably won't run this because sometimes you need Vanish as a defensive, but making a Vanish an offensive to turn around, 50% extra damage, that could totally be worth the value. But even get Subtlety rogues to run the talent that it decreases your health but lets you use Vanishes more often in PvP. Who knows? If anything, I have to say the legendaries that we got for rogues for the most part are not super creative. They're not terrible by any measure, not all of them are all 100% RNG fest, but I would have liked something brand new, something interesting, and I think a lot of rogues will agree with me. And I think that maybe we could have gotten legendaries to make certain builds, like a backstab build for a Subtlety more stronger, or like a no pistol shot build for Outlaw, or a pistol only build or something along those lines to make different playstyles and different playstyle options. But at least all these legendaries seem quite strong, seem quite useful, and I cannot wait to test them out either way. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. Cannot wait to make another follow-up video on rogue legendaries once we can test them. But thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see all of you in another video.